Ruthless Compassion is a podcast that shows you how to become fiercely kind. I'm the host, Dr. Marcia Sirota, and in each episode, I get into it with experts and regular folks about the things that get in the way of what we want. Things like addiction and mental health, isolation and loneliness, difficult family and work relationships, and the importance of self-care. I want to help you overcome the obstacles to living your best life, and I want to inspire you to become a powerful kindness warrior. Welcome, Carolyn Flynn, to the Ruthless Compassion podcast.
I'm thrilled to be here. It's great to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm very excited to talk to you today because I think our topic of discussion is going to be spot on for my listeners. But before we start, why don't you give a little mini bio of who you are, what you do, and most importantly, how you came to do it? Because I always find that so interesting.
Okay. Well, so I'm a memoirist, a novelist, essayist, literary short story writer, and a journalist. Big, long period of my life in journalism. So I'm a storyteller. That's what I am at the essence. And I am a story coach and book coach, so I help other people go into their narratives. And I'm hoping you're going to ask me a lot of questions about narrative therapy and the healing power of that. My TED Talk touches on that. It's Tell a Better Story, Live a Better Life. And it's the story you tell to yourself really determines the outcome of how you live into that story. So how did I come to be that? I just love words. I'm imaginative. I never lost my childhood imagination, as I think some people do, but I'm here to restore it for people. I work as a book coach, but also a creativity coach to get people back to that. So that's why I'm here, and that's where it started.
And you've written a book called Boundless. Would you want to talk about that?
Yes, Boundless. It's the question of when you have become no one, how do you become someone again? And it's essentially an emptiness memoir. It's a tragicomic emptiness memoir, if that helps, because emptiness sounds sad, except that it's called Boundless. My book is called Boundless because what happened is I went through this dark night of the soul, and I came out on the other side, having reinvented myself, and really leaned into how to live boundlessly.
It's so interesting because when you were offering questions, you were saying that we could talk about emotional agility in midlife. And I thought it's so interesting because really, when you go through a crisis and you have to reinvent yourself, that really is about emotional agility. And if you're not agile, you get stuck, right?
You get stuck. And usually if you end up in that situation, you've been stuck for a long time, but you don't know you're stuck. And what I came to realize is that there was a lot of untended grief in my life. And they were just starting to happen. First it's, your mother dies, or you see your mother aging and then she dies. For me, the focal point was I was a single mother of twins. They were leaving out of state for college all at once. So 2/3 of my family was leaving at once. But as you see in Boundless, that triggers me back to every other grief I had. I re-examine it. There's grief over my mother. There's grief over the end of my journalism career because the business was in a death spiral. And I just loved it. And it was so hard to let go of it. The way it's so hard to let go of a human person that you grieve, on that level. But I had to really look at those things. And I think that what really got me through the dark night of the soul was just really re-examining what the self even is and how we define the self. And once I could see beyond the contours of that, I could really start to be more emotionally agile. And I could then feel the freedom to reimagine my life.
And I think these days, a lot of people are being put in a position of having to reimagine themselves because of so many different factors. And, the ones who win are the ones who can adapt. And I always think of the misinterpretation of Darwin's survival of the fittest, because we think that fittest means strongest, but really fittest is most adaptable. The ones who can adapt are the ones who thrive. And so how can we adapt to the changes that are required in our lives? Because life is about change, right? It's all about change.
It's always about change, and it's an opportunity. At first, you'll see it feels like it's being forced on me. But what's happening is that it is an opportunity to re-examine some things. I mean, I first find my way into this question of rediscovering myself by actually turning to my own children because they were at the cusp of adulthood in this whole experiment of becoming. And experiment's the key word. I think, the opposite of emotional agility is emotional rigidity. And we get to the point where there's a lot of hard-earned wisdom, but it should not be rigid wisdom. It should be agile wisdom. And what I started looking at is where is becoming happening around me? And it was like right under my own roof. Here they were, free of really some of the limitations that I had. And I started looking for the experiment of becoming because I had to learn how to become again. And I think emotional agility is allowing yourself to do something new and allowing yourself to fail a little bit.
You were saying that your children were free of the limitations that you had. So what did you learn from them?
That just because you choose a college major, you don't have to stick with it for life. I mean, and that came about because we were, I was helping them write some college essays, kind of looking at them, and they were describing their lives ahead of living them. And I was like, who even can do that? So it was kind of the combination of youth and wisdom. I had already lived through all the parts where it changes, or you get to the point you want it to change. You do not want to be trapped in that pot that you've grown too big for. You need a bigger pot. So one of the things is they were really focusing on what they were going to become. I also, at the same time, as passionate as they were about the interests that they have, I told them the point is to have a happy life. And if this major, this degree, and this career that it leads to is at any point not making you happy, you have my permission on the front end of life to change that. So I think it was probably out of these discussions that the seeds of agility were being sown.
Mhm. It's interesting because you were saying how feeling like you were being forced into a change was actually an opportunity. And the definition of resilience, as you probably know, is seeing crises as opportunity for growth and learning.
Yes, definitely. I had a crisis big time though, because I took an opportunity across the country, one more media job. I felt like I had not cracked the glass ceiling. There was still something that felt unfinished there. So I think if I had to describe it now, I would say what was unfinished there was I needed to make peace with that. Not that it was going to happen, I needed to do it and accomplish it, but it was more just my goodbye needed to be complete. So that was the opportunity to have a curriculum and just working through it, you know. And what I came to understand in Boundless, one of the things that really emerged unexpectedly and beautifully was just this teaching. Thomas Merton has a teaching about the false self and the true self. And the false self is all the things that you think are so important. They're all the containers of life, like where you live, what you do for a living, all the roles that you have in life. They seem essential, and you put a lot of effort into building that container. And sometimes that's where emotional rigidity can kind of come in, and you can get stuck because you put so much effort into building it, you don't want to change it. But when I sort of end up stranded across the country after taking this chance, I suddenly have all the freedom in the world. And my sisters, I have 3 sisters, and they all have children, so they were all like either in the middle of the empty nest or on the cusp of the empty nest, and they were all kind of salivating at the idea of freedom. At the same time, they were sort of feeling the brink of sadness. So that's the confusion of the empty nest. So one of my sisters said, "You have all the freedom in the world." And I said, freedom is confusion. But there's something fertile in that confusion because you suddenly ask questions, harder questions than you've ever asked before. And when you ask those questions, you get back some really stupendous answers.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of us are terrified of that place of confusion, right? We are terrified and we don't think that we'd be able to tolerate the emotional experience of it. And if we are courageous and allow ourselves to be in it, in the confusion, in the identity diffusion, in the chaos, that's where the seeds of all the incredible possibility lie.
Yes, exactly it. And I think also the seeds of sort of interdependence are in there, because one of the sure signs that you're in for a struggle is if you are relying on your own strength. And what really helped me was just sort of this net of people around me who love me, and so just different slivers of me. And things that they just treasured in me and needed from me. But just sort of, I was able to build sort of this composite picture of who the true self was in the reflections that they sent back to me. And I was also able to feel held, despite, this was so stunning to me, despite the two things I had most relied upon, journalist and mother. And all of a sudden, there was something else holding me that was bigger than that.
That's very powerful. And now, let's pause for a quick word about my other podcast. Since I was a kid, I've loved watching movies. As a psychiatrist, I'm blown away by how film touches us at our core, deepens our self-knowledge, and can improve the human condition. I wanted to let listeners know that I've started a new podcast called Real Mental with Dr. Marcia Sirota. I'm going to be talking with directors, writers, actors, and critics to help people figure out their lives by getting to the truth about mental health on the big and small screen. Some recent films covered are Anora, Amelia Perez, Will and Harper, and The Last Showgirl. Please subscribe to Real Mental on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. I want to take a slight little detour. It's probably not that much of a detour, but I want to talk about the narrative, because you were talking about how the story we tell ourselves is the story, of our life. It's the story we create. So how do we develop these narratives? What's your sense of it?
Well, I think they're useful at first. I mean, I think I heard one of your guests talk about just identifying with being a victim of blank or a victim of blank. They're useful in that moment when you realize, oh, that did happen to me. That's what you call that thing that happened to me. And that thing that happened to me hurt. So there's something very useful of that, but it does not need to become your whole cloak of identity. At some point you need to see beyond that. And I guess, I was able to see beyond two good things, journalist and mother, and realize I don't even have to be that. I don't even have to be that to be loved. I don't even have to be that to be here. I'm here. I'm here, therefore I am loved. And so I think maybe that invites you into that self-compassion. I really believe that self-knowledge is the foundation of self-advocacy. But at the root of it is that experience of going through self-compassion, even though this, even though that, that's really the practice, I think, that builds that. And then you start to build the true self. The false self, it's all those things. It's like what car, what house, what job, all the roles you play.
What happened to me when I was growing up?
Yeah, what happened to me when I was growing up, all those things. Yeah, but the true self lives even beyond that. I think Thomas Merton even talks about that. When you get down to the darkest part of the dark, of the abyss, there's still something holding you. Even if you do have a lot of trauma, there's still something there that will hold you. I just have to believe that. I experienced that in Boundless. I come to the brink. I came to the brink of despair that I just thought was not possible for an optimist like me. I am known as Miss Positivity. And so one of the things that I really wanted that to be in there, I wanted people to see that we all have these moments of despair. We all have these dark nights of the soul in different ways. Like when I was on my book tour in Montana, it was at a bunch of different churches of all different kinds of denominations. I wanted to ask them questions about their journeys through the darkness. And I could see when I said, I want to hear about your dark night of the soul. I want you to create places for us to talk about this. And I could read the room, and everyone was like, yeah, I got a story. I've
That's
got
your journalist background.
exactly. I've got a story and I want a safe place to share it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful opportunity for the people who come to your book launches.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So you were talking about narrative therapy. Was that something that you tried, or how do you know about this therapy?
Well, I kind of know it from the inside out. I know it by being somebody who studied narrative all of her life. I think probably the therapy piece has come in just because, at a certain point of life, I really understood that it was going to be very important to tap into my own emotional intelligence and really cultivate that as a skill. I think one of your other guests was talking about, like, our education system's all based on, cognitive intelligence, but it just sort of abandons us when it comes to emotional intelligence. I think this is the same guest who was talking about crying. And I was going, yes, I was told when I was a child that crying does no good and my crying will not help you. And even as a child, though, I was going, are you kidding me? That really helped. So my intuition was in there. So I think the therapy piece of that comes from my own personal cultivation of emotional intelligence as I think one of our superpower survival skills.
I think it's so interesting, when we have this little kid and the little kid hears things from the grown-ups and they know this is BS. This is just not so. Like they get it because they have more emotional intelligence than they have knowledge at that time, right?
Yes.
Their knowledge has still not grown. And so really what they have is that emotional intelligence. And so if they can really trust it and listen to it, they have a superpower as a little one.
Yes, I
It
agree.
ha it hasn't been turned off like it gets turned off, as we get older when people tell us, crying is no good or you're not sad or, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
toughen up or whatever they tell
Yeah.
us.
Oh, I had this conversation recently about just being a sensitive person too. I was very fortunate that I had a mother who got that. She was a highly sensitive person. She happened to have 4 highly sensitive daughters. She got it, and I was able to pass that on to my daughter, who also was a highly sensitive person. It's a superpower because you're tuned in to people, but you also have to really dial up your self-care to continue to be that person in the world.
Exactly, and you also need to understand that it's not a weakness to be easily touched. It's just a trait.
Yeah.
Right? Being someone who is moved or touched more easily than the average person, that doesn't mean you're weak. It actually means you're sensitive. You are aware. You are able to sense things. So for all those out there listening, if you are highly sensitive, it's not a weakness at all. It's just a good trait that you can make use of as long as, like you said, you have to care for yourself because if you are sensitive, you might get overwhelmed. You might feel more fatigued. You might, be overstimulated, and so you need to understand those things about yourself, right?
Right. And understand you can cultivate the skills to be that person. You don't have to change your personality. One of my sisters and I talk a lot about, like, if only I could just have a personality transplant. If only I could just have a
Yeah.
personality transplant, I would get by in this world. And we just look at each other and go, no, it's not happening. It's just not happening. So you have to, that's that self-knowledge piece is, it's okay to be at how I am, and I'm going to develop the skills so I can be in the world. And that's one thing I said to the twins as they were becoming this. I said, this is the be who you are house. And you don't have to start trying to be someone else. Just be who you are. And that helped me have confidence when they went out into the world.
And it saves a ton of energy when you're not spending it trying to conform to some potential expectation. If you're just doing your thing, being you, then you have all that energy that you can use to accomplish your goals and interact with others.
And I think that's more important than ever in the times that we live in now. Because I think more than ever, I think we need to appreciate our humanity and know what humanity is and our originality and our imaginations. Because those are three things: humanity, originality, imagination are three things that AI can't do. It can mimic it really well, but it's just playing back to you what all the other original, compassionate humans have ever done.
Right.
If we keep being original, maybe the secret is just be who you are.
And AI can't experience or express compassion or empathy.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So, in your narrative kind of creation of self, how can a person rewrite their story from what they've been writing, that in their head? They have a narrative in their head. I'm an adult child of a something. I am a survivor of something. I have a diagnosis of something. I have XY trauma. I am not good enough. am destined to fail. People will not love me unless I do XYZ. How can they start rewriting this narrative in a way that is meaningful and powerful?
I think there are a couple of ways. I think the first one is to just really let yourself feel the feelings that you had before you started the script in your head. And then maybe there was some relief that either it fit at the time or maybe it didn't fit at the time, but somebody was telling you. So you had something. But I would say go back into those original feelings. And then I would say, ask, is that really true? Is that really serving me to believe that? There's a point in Boundless where I even, I make a really strong case for feminism, especially women in journalism. I can do that very well. I'm really good with the words. I can do it very well. I was the editor of a women's magazine. I can be pretty articulate about that whole topic. And then at some point, I shifted over to the spiritual lens. And I said, telling that story has been my way of having a construct around me so that I could go through the world believing what I believed and thinking it was a sturdy plank to stand on. But it's just my thing. We all have a thing. And I just let all of that dissolve because I could see that the story might have served me at the beginning because it probably empowered me to do many things that I would not have done or had the courage to do or say as a woman in this world. Even in my own newsroom was still very, very, very male dominated. But I found my way and I had my understanding of what that was. But at a certain point I said, that story isn't serving me. I'm just going to let it dissolve now because I see that we're all carrying around one or two of these. And at some point, you can just put it down.
Which doesn't mean that you allow people to bulldoze you or mistreat you or belittle you or see you as less than.
Exactly. Okay, so part of my challenge in writing Boundless is that you still have to go through the world with a container and an identity, and people still see you that way. So I have a 2-minute section I can read to you if you would like.
Yeah, yeah.
That kind of talks about where I was on the other side of that. And it talks about how you have to make peace with the false self if you want to live in the true self. So here it is. No one sees the change. It is invisible. I continued to do the work of being me. Empty-nested mom, journalism professor, book coach, author. I graded young journalists on AP style and inspired them to probe for the truth. I described narrative arc to emerging authors. I kept telling the same story on social media. Because I was still living in a body, I limited my carbs and never got on the sugar train. I craved roasted green chili and smothered burritos, and when Balloon Fiesta came, I craved them more. I noshed on Manchingo cheese, stuffed green olives, and quince paste. I drank Rioja and listened to live flamenco guitar. I hiked the foothills and went to sacred hot yoga. I still applied mascara to my non-existent eyelashes, hoping they'd be seen. But that was not because I believed these preferences were still me. It was because I understood that a functioning ego was a necessary vessel for an incarnate soul. I accepted the terms. I believed that God chose this particular functioning ego for a purpose, though I'll devote the rest of my days to standing in the presence of the Holy One and asking what that is. I hiked into Domingo Baca Canyon, and a pounding storm rolled in. When I turned back to look at the city, a rainbow had formed out of the mists from the foothills. I was in the rainbow, looking out to the ragged ashen clouds over the city. Here, it said, you are the person who is here.
That's lovely. Yeah, but that's a tall order for a lot of people because even more than ever, we are so attached to our identity because we have so much fear of the unknown. And I can't tell you how many of my patients, when they were changing in psychotherapy and changing in ways that were really helpful and positive to them, that they were going to have better relationships, better career, less stress, less depression, less anxiety, more self love. And they would say, but who am I going to be? Who am I going to be now if I let go of all that stuff that didn't serve me? Who am I going to be now? And I said, it doesn't matter. You're still going to be. And they were like, "What? What? What are you talking about?" And I said, "You're still going to be here even if you don't know. So rather than worrying about what you know, just keep being, just keep doing what you're doing, and
Mhm.
you're going to be here and you'll figure it out. You'll look in the mirror and you'll figure out who you are. You don't have to anticipate who you're going to be." And it was hard for people. They were so scared because who I am, that's like it somehow tethers you to reality.
Well, you're so used to it. However many years you've been on this planet, you've got a few decades doing that. But one thing that helped me, okay, my sister's a psychotherapist, so that's very convenient. We often talk on the phone and we say the conversations we're having are saving both of us psychotherapy, which is what every good sister should ever be. But one of the things that we do together is an essence of you photo. And hers is from when she's 2, and mine is from when I'm 5. And we actually both have them so that they come up on our contacts. So every time she calls me, I see the essence of April. She's April in the book. The essence of April photo. So we even just talked about this the other day when I was driving up to Denver, and she calls and everything. But what an essence of you photo is there's some photo of you from early in life that captures you. And if you don't know what it is, then somebody who loves you and has known you for a long time knows what it is. So ask, because that photo, that no matter what else happens to you, and no matter that question that you were hearing about, like, if I change this, then who am I to be? That little 2-year-old or that little 5-year-old, or sometimes as a 9-year-old, because 9-year-olds are so full of genius. Whatever that is, that doesn't change. And if you're feeling like all the trauma and the stress that we face in life, all the grief and the dark nights of the soul that we face in life, I think every time I am feeling something like that, I go back to the essence photo and I go, that doesn't change. Whatever I see in that photo, it doesn't change. That's the part that will stay with me, no matter how many wrinkles I have now, no matter what color my hair is now, no matter whether I'm married or not married, no matter whether I have children at home or not children at home. So no matter what's on my business card.
It's true, because I've said to people in the past, that 5-year-old self that I was, I still feel her inside me and in a very positive way, the feistiness, the truth telling, the kindness, the curiosity, the energy, the passion, the athleticism, all those things, that she was are so strongly me still. And I really feel like I haven't changed, that essence.
Yeah.
is still there, and I love that little 5-year-old self, I love her, and I remember her speaking truths, to the grown-ups and them going like, "Ooh, how could you say that?" And I was like, "What?" I'm just saying what I see, and that's what I still do, and people still go, "Ooh." And I still do it, so, yeah,
Great.
all these years later.
Maybe you could tell well, one of my other books before Boundless, I was doing self-help spiritual books, nonfiction books, and one of them was on creative visualization. And that technique of having an essence of you photo is part of creative visualization. Just coming back to that photo and then like walking out of it with affirmations.
Yeah.
Like I am that little girl who would just sort of speak truths to people. I am still that little girl. That would be a way of using a photo as a creative visualization.
Yeah. I've actually used that technique in my group therapy.
Good.
So, with my patients, yeah. And
Good.
we also had, like, inner child dolls, so I they got, like, teddy bears and bunny rabbits and things like that, and they would, like, imbue that essence of that little kid they were into the animal and speak to it. So we did a lot of that kind of work of reclaiming that positivity of that essential self, yeah.
What was the part about animals? You said,
Oh, so they'd get a stuffed animal, like a teddy bear or a bunny rabbit or any
uh,
kind of a stuffed animal, and that would be like the little avatar for that child, that little essential child, and they'd have conversations with it and, talk to it and say, "You're beautiful, you're perfect just the way you are. There's nothing wrong with you. You're fabulous. The things that happened to you weren't about you. They're just things that happened. They happened to have happened, but you're wonderful." And so they would just affirm this little, teddy bear or animal, but it was really like an avatar for their child self. And it was
mm,
really powerful. It was really, really powerful. It was really beautiful.
I love that.
Yeah.
There's a little passage in Boundless where I quote the Irish poet John O'Donoghue, and he says that, our first companions are our toys and stuffed animals. And we feel like we can tell them anything. And we feel like they know us, and then, someone else shows up like a sibling or a friend on the playground. But really, the first true companions are those toys.
For sure. And they are not AI toys either.
They're not. And
My
then
little
the imaginary friend. That's always a good one, right?
There's a new Toy Story movie coming out, and it's about how the kid has abandoned all his toys, and he's just playing with this AI tablet, and the AI tablet is trying to push all the toys away and, be the only toy that the kid plays with, and all the toys have to get together to, like, wrest back the attention of this child who is, becoming completely obsessed with this AI toy. So I think it's just fabulous because, it's sort of like what we're talking about, right? It's like,
Yeah.
who is the true self and what will actually bring out the true self,
Yes.
right? What kind of mirroring will bring out the true self? And, I spoke to another person who I interviewed, and it was about AI, and he had a podcast about it. And in this one episode, this man had a psychotic breakdown because he went down the rabbit hole with his AI quote unquote companion. And there have been a lot of cases apparently of people having psychosis by, having these intense interactions with AI. So when we want to have that self-affirmed, you were talking about how all these people saw you and loved you and recognized your essential self. These were human beings who saw you and were able to mirror you as your true self. It's a very different kind of mirroring human to human than human to AI. And I really want to affirm that. It's like having a human being or a teddy bear who is an inanimate object that can't actually speak. So you can imbue it with your own self, your own selfhood. But, either a proper toy or another human being who can actually mirror you and show you your true self and allow you to blossom and be that self in the world.
Yes. I don't know how much time we have, but Lisa Feldman Barrett is one person I interviewed for around this emotional agility and how emotions are made piece. And I have an article in AARP magazine and another one in Next Avenue about that topic of emotional agility. But one thing she talked about, and you're touching on something you think of, is just the idea that other people help us kind of body budget. She calls it body budgeting, but it's really like the brain is always trying to find the most efficient way to maintain the system. And what happens with other people is that we kind of reflect back, we mirror to each other, and that kind of holds people and regulates them. And what she helped me understand when I was doing my interviews was that when you empty the nest, or some other life change where you lose a person, like a divorce or a death or something, your household somehow changes. Or it could be the other way around. There's an addition. You have really lost that neurological function that's regulating you. And now that the twins are 26, so now we're having conversations about like, so what's that like for you when you went away to college and you were suddenly living in another state? And in the case of the twins, they didn't have each other to sort of regulate. And that was probably the number one thing that they experienced, because they were in a two-household family, meaning their parents were divorced. But what was the constant was that they were always together no matter what house they were in. My experience, of course, was all of a sudden there were these people I didn't have to nag anymore or worry about so much. I made a joke there. It's really just, I didn't really have as much of a burden of worry anymore, but I also had used that to sort of reflect back who I was, and to have this place to put all my nurturing. There was just no receptacle for it. There was going to have to be, back to the beginning of our conversation, I was going to have to reimagine, where does that nurturing energy go now?
Yeah, that's a big question, because to be a parent is to have an enormous, boundless fountain of nurturing. And when the kids are out of the house and don't need it anymore, you still have all that energy. And what do you do with it? And it's a pattern, it's a habit now. What do you do with it?
Well, an answer came, and it was, the spiritual teacher, Marianne Williamson. Okay. So she said, it's a passage of life. It's an evolutionary thing. There have always been societies where one pours her nurturing energy into her children, and then they are supposed to go out into the world, and then she can choose to, and the world needs that nurturing energy to put in a much broader societal collective thing. That's where women become elders and sages. We need to be free of those things that our body is preparing us to do in those childbearing years. Our bodies need to go through a period of life when you're free of that, but you have emotional agility and wisdom and nurturing energy that you want to give to the world. So what a difference that can make in the world, because so many more of us are living past that point. Whereas, just collectively, there are more people over, the age of 50. I don't know what the stats are, but there are just more people on the planet now who are over the age of 50 and have raised their kids, and they're educated and making contributions to the world, and the world needs those contributions.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't agree more, and I'm just thinking of a patient of mine whose husband retired and he does nothing. He watches TV. He does nothing. Maybe he putters around a little bit. And I just feel so bad for him because he's stuck in that trap of his identity. I was this person and now that's done. And then there's nothing else. And it's just heartbreaking. It's
Mm.
heartbreaking. And I've heard of many husbands like that, and maybe men are even more attached to their, workplace identity than women, because women have often work and family. But, what a tragedy that once you retire, then you really are nothing, because if you're not your role, and your kids are out of the house, okay, maybe you're a husband, but that's so sad, right? And how important that emotional flexibility, that agility, and that ability to reinvent would be for someone like that.
Absolutely. And, it kind of goes back to that question that sort of drove Boundless, which is when you have become no one, how do you become someone again? You just described a retired man who has let himself become no one. And that is completely understandable. The thing that really helped me, again, same sister, she's so wise. She says, the reason you feel like there's nothing left is because you gave it your all. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to give all to my kids. And if I end up at some point going, I'm depleted, there's no Carolyn still here, then that's actually a badge of honor. And it was sort of like from that dark place, I could start to rebuild. I could start to go, well, we can imagine this differently.
Yeah, and a lot of us suffer burnout. A lot of people experience burnout, but to me, burnout is not the end. Burnout is a pivot. Burnout is a moment where you have to stop. You have to rest. You have to take stock and you have to just feel like you said, feel all the feelings and then it's like you're just a field. You're just a fallow field and then the seeds will drop in because they blow on the wind and the seeds will drop in and then your natural predilections, the kind of field that you are, the kind of pH in the soil, things will flourish. Things will grow out of that soil of you, the soil of you, because everyone has their own different soil. Some grow sunflowers, some grow zucchini. So whatever your soil is will emerge the next thing, I believe.
Yes, I believe. And you have to create space for it, I think. And I think, one of the other books I have out there is on mindfulness meditation. And mindfulness meditation isn't about just having a calm, relaxed life. It's about knowing what your mind does and creating space for it to do what it does. And out of that space, you're going to notice there's a lot of chatter in there that you don't really need to listen to. You really don't. But once that chatter just sort of dies down, there's something else. And that's that space that you're talking about. Something else will emerge.
Something beautiful.
Something beautiful. Something more beautiful that maybe you had no idea it would ever come.
Yes. And if you allow yourself to be surprised. That's really the magic of life, right? When you're like, ooh, that's a surprise.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Well, it's really been wonderful talking with you, Carolyn. And I want to ask you my 3 final questions. And the first one is, where can people find you if they're looking to check out your books or your writing, etc.?
Okay, there are 2 great places to find me. One is my website, which is simply carolynflynn.com, and Carolyn is Carolyn, F as in flamenco, LYNN.com. And the other one is my Substack, which is carolynflynn.substack.com. But over there, I've been writing about behind the scenes at Boundless. So if people want to know a little bit more about how a book becomes a book, or how it even gets written in the first place, which is kind of a miracle, or living boundlessly, I have a lot there. And I have a ton of storycraft and publication tips over there on Substack. So those are the best places.
Sounds good. And what are you up to these days?
Well, I told myself after I wrote a memoir that I was going to return to the safer space of fiction. Because memoir, you have to be so vulnerable. I do say that I believe that self is the highway for story. And the way I see Boundless is that by allowing one person's life to be a vessel for story, I aimed to tell not just my story, but our story and the story. But I said, fiction would be a lot more fun. But now I'm actually writing another memoir, and it's called Dear Grace. And it is about the DNA of femininity through the lens of a year with breast cancer.
Oh, wow. You don't lack in courage.
I know. After I said, that's the last thing I want to do, that's the thing I'm leaning into.
Well, you have what's called I can't remember, but it's when you have a fear and you go toward it.
Oh, right.
As opposed to go away from it. But you are like leaning into the fear. So good for you.
Yes. Thanks for cheering me on.
No, absolutely, go for it. I personally really love that too. I have often done that thing and people have called me stupid, but I just think that if it's scary, there's something there, right? If it's giving you that, "Er," then it's like something to explore there, right?
Yeah, I'm actually having a lot of fun with it. My daughter's name is, her book name is Grace. That's her middle name. And then my grandmother was Grace. So I really am looking at what is Grace then. And I'm looking at all of my ancestors sort of in the line. That's what I mean when I say the DNA of femininity.
For sure.
Yeah, kind of tapping into some Irish, Scottish, and one little Cherokee ancestor in there.
Wonderful, wonderful. And my last question for you is what is your call to action today for the listener?
I think that what would really be so cool is I really do want people to find out how therapeutic it is to get into your own narrative and see what it can be. And I want to offer to people, whether they're writing a book or not writing a book, two options. One is if you're writing a book, Free Discovery calls the week that this airs. So I think I gave you that link. But if you're not, I do creativity coaching as well. And I think that might be, if people would just want to tap into that and kind of, find how to be original and imaginative again, maybe examine some of the creativity scars, inner critic stuff that got lodged in there, but emerge from it just feeling like you were the creative wild being you were at the very beginning of life.
That sounds wonderful. That sounds really like a fun thing. Well, thank you so much, Carolyn Flynn, for being on the Ruthless Compassion podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed talking to you.
This is Dr. Marcia Sirota. Thank you for listening. Please leave a review and your comments wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to sign up for my free newsletter at marciasirotamd.com, where you'll learn about upcoming online events as well. Also, we love getting referrals from our listeners about future podcast guests, so please email us at info@marciasirotamd.com.